There comes a moment in everyone's life when they realize something uncomfortable. Most of the frustration that ruins their day doesn't come from major problems, but from the tiny, repetitive irritations that chip away at their patience. A careless comment, a slow reply, a stranger's bad mood, a small mistake, a sudden inconvenience. None of these are serious, yet they have the power to hijack your emotions as if they were. You tell yourself you're tired, stressed, or overwhelmed, but the truth is simpler than that. You're reacting to life on autopilot, letting every interruption, every tone, every imperfection lodge itself inside your mind. You feel like you're being dragged from one irritation to another, as if you have no real control. This happens because most people never learn how to manage the space between stimulus and response. They live at the mercy of their impulses, letting immediate reactions dictate their behavior. And in that pattern, every minor annoyance becomes a trigger. But the Stoics saw life differently. They believed that you should not be shaped by circumstances but by your chosen perspective. Today, you're going to learn how to reclaim this inner space, starting with a practice that allows you to interrupt your emotional momentum before it takes over. This isn't about pretending life doesn't irritate you. It's about learning to govern yourself in the middle of it. And it begins with the first attitude. Attitude 1. The inner slowdown. Reset your mind before it speeds up. Most irritation happens because your mind accelerates too quickly. Something small happens, and before you even understand what you're feeling, your thoughts sprint ahead, building stories, assumptions, and judgments. The irritation grows not from the event itself, but from the speed at which your reaction unfolds. The Stoics understood this well. The faster your mind moves, the less clarity you have. And without clarity, you react impulsively. The inner slowdown is the practice of deliberately reducing your mental speed the moment something begins to bother you. It sounds simple, but it's one of the most powerful emotional tools you can develop. Instead of responding instantly, you create a deliberate pause, not to suppress your emotion, but to observe it without letting it take control. Imagine someone makes a sharp remark. Normally, your mind jumps immediately to defensiveness or irritation. But with the inner slowdown, you interrupt that automatic chain. You breathe before you respond. You allow your thoughts to stretch out instead of colliding all at once. In that extra second, the irritation that seemed sharp becomes smaller, more manageable, less urgent. It loses momentum. This attitude works because irritation feeds on speed. The faster you move mentally, the more intense the emotion becomes. But when you slow down intentionally, everything softens. Your mind becomes less reactive and more aware. You take back the steering wheel. One powerful way to practice this is to focus on your physical sensations the moment frustration appears. Notice your jaw tightening, your shoulders rising, your chest contracting. Instead of reacting, let these sensations unfold while you remain still. This simple pause acts like a buffer. It reminds your mind that you are in control, not the moment. Another key part of the inner slowdown is slowing the stories you tell yourself. Irritation often comes with interpretations. He's disrespecting me. She doesn't care. They should be more considerate. But none of these thoughts are facts. They are emotional projections. When you slow down, you give your mind time to question these assumptions instead of accepting them blindly. You can also use the practice of micro-observation. When something irritates you, instead of reacting, simply observe what is happening inside your mind as if you were watching someone else. Notice how quickly your thoughts try to interpret the situation. Notice how your ego jumps in. Notice how your body tenses. This small act of observation immediately creates distance, and distance weakens irritation. The inner slowdown is not about being passive. It's about giving your rational mind time to show up before your emotional mind takes the lead. When you practice this attitude daily, you start responding to life with intention instead of impulse. You stop letting small annoyances pull you into emotional turbulence. You make space for clarity, patience, and calm certainty. And most importantly, this attitude restores your sense of ownership over your inner world. You stop being someone who reacts to everything and start becoming someone who chooses when and if to respond. This is the first step toward breaking the cycle of getting irritated over things that don't deserve your energy. Once you master the art of slowing down your mind, the rest of the attitudes become easier to apply. Because a calm mind doesn't get dragged easily. A calm mind observes, evaluates, and decides. And now that you've learned how to reset your momentum, we move to the next attitude. One that will teach you how to weaken irritation by changing the meaning of what happens around you. Attitude 2. The detachment filter. Separate what you feel from what actually happened. Most irritation comes from a simple mistake. You merge what happened with what you felt about what happened. The two become one, and your emotional reaction feels like the truth. But the moment you learn to separate the raw event from the emotional meaning you gave it, annoyance loses most of its power. The Stoics understood this difference better than anyone. They knew that reality is rarely the problem. Interpretation is. The detachment filter is the practice of pulling the emotional label off the event before it becomes your reaction. Think of it as holding up a mental shield between the stimulus and your interpretation. You acknowledge the event, but you remove the emotional stamp your mind tries to attach to it. It's not about dismissing your feelings. It's about preventing them from rewriting the meaning of the situation. Let's look at how this works in daily life. Someone speaks to you with a sharp tone. Most people immediately feel insulted because they interpret the tone as disrespect. But the detachment filter allows you to observe the tone without absorbing it. You notice, this person spoke sharply, but you don't jump to, they are attacking me. You pause the emotional conclusion long enough to stay objective. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they're rushing. Maybe they're just not good at expressing themselves. Not everything is a personal strike. Or imagine you send a message and someone takes hours to respond. Without the detachment filter, irritation builds instantly. Your mind fills in the blanks. They're ignoring me. They don't care. I'm not important. But none of these thoughts are facts. They're emotional assumptions. The detachment filter stops this chain reaction by asking a single question. What do I actually know, and what am I adding? You know they didn't respond yet. Everything else is your mind filling the silence with insecurity. This attitude is powerful because irritation almost always comes from the emotional layers you stack on top of reality. The detachment filter forces you to peel those layers off and see the situation as it is. Plain, simple, and usually harmless. But this doesn't make you blind or naive. It doesn't mean you excuse harmful behavior or ignore genuine disrespect. What it does is prevent you from reacting to imagined harm. It protects your peace from your own interpretations. Here's another example. You're walking in a store and someone bumps into you without apologizing. Immediately, you feel a spark of irritation. But what caused it? The bump itself? Or the story your mind told afterward? How rude. People have no manners. They disrespected me. The detachment filter reminds you. The event equals someone bumped into you. Everything else equals added meaning. This attitude helps you shrink problems before they grow into unnecessary emotional weight. Because the truth is simple. Most things that irritate you have nothing to do with you personally. People act based on their own stress, their own flaws, their own distractions, their own conditions. Not because they plan to upset you. When you master the detachment filter, you start seeing the world with far more clarity. You stop assuming intention. You stop taking things personally that were never personal. You stop letting minor interactions drain your emotional energy. Another strength of this attitude is that it interrupts your ego. Ego is always looking for signs of disrespect, unfairness, or offense. It magnifies everything. But through the detachment filter, you downgrade small moments to their actual size. Small. You stop letting your ego turn inconveniences into psychological battles. This shift makes you remarkably calmer. People may speak abruptly, forget something, reply late, misunderstand you, or appear inattentive, and instead of reacting with irritation, you respond with objectivity. You say to yourself, "This is what happened. My mind wants to make it personal. I don't have to follow that impulse." This is the beginning of emotional mastery. And because you're no longer absorbing everything emotionally, you gain a sense of inner spaciousness. Problems don't cling to you. Annoyances slide off. You become someone who sees clearly, reacts wisely, and moves on quickly. Others will feel this steadiness in you, a calm presence that doesn't get shaken by trivialities. Now that you've learned how to detach your feelings from the facts, you're ready for the next step. an attitude that will anchor your emotional stability even deeper by redefining where your focus and responsibility truly lie. Before we continue, drop a comment below. What's one situation where you realized you reacted based on emotion, not reality? Your insight might help someone who faces the same struggle. Attitude 3. The scale principle: reduce small problems before they grow inside you. Most irritation doesn't come from major challenges. It comes from the way the mind inflates minor inconveniences until they feel far more significant than they are. A delay becomes disrespect. A clumsy sentence becomes an offense. A simple misunderstanding becomes a personal attack. Without noticing, you allow tiny sparks to turn into emotional flames, not because the situation had real weight, but because your perception magnified it. The scale principle is the attitude that prevents this inflation. Instead of reacting automatically, you learn to evaluate the true size of the situation before giving it emotional value. The scale principle is simple. Every time irritation appears, pause and assign the event a size, not in emotion, but in logic. Your initial feeling will almost always exaggerate the problem. Your instinctive reaction is fast, loud, and disproportionate because the emotional mind loves urgency. But most of what irritates you barely deserves a sentence, much menos a reaction. The moment you begin treating problems according to their real scale, your emotional life changes dramatically. Imagine you're in a conversation and someone interrupts you. Instantly, you feel a flash of annoyance. But before deciding how to respond, you evaluate. Is this a genuine threat or just a small breach of courtesy? In most cases, it's the latter. Something that might bother you for a moment but doesn't have the power to harm your life, reputation, or relationships. When you place the event on the right scale, the irritation shrinks on its own. Another example. Someone responds with a tone that sounds slightly impatient. Without the scale principle, you would react defensively or assume the worst. With it, you ask, is this a major problem or simply someone having a rough moment? The answer, almost always, is that it's insignificant. That insight alone preserves your calm. The human mind tends to treat every inconvenience as if it deserves the same level of emotional involvement. That's why people waste hours thinking about something that lasted only a few seconds. You replay words, gestures, and interactions in your head long after the moment has passed, because you never reassign the problem to its true size. The scale principle creates a natural barrier between your emotional world and external events. It gives you the ability to look at a situation from the outside rather than being immediately consumed by it. A helpful way to practice this attitude is to imagine a mental scale from 1 to 10. Level 1 represents tiny inconveniences, a misplaced item, a slow walker ahead of you, someone speaking loudly nearby. Level 10 represents true emergencies, life-changing situations, critical dangers, events that demand immediate action. Most of what irritates you falls somewhere between 1 and 3. Yet your reaction often lands near 7 or 8. The mismatch between size and reaction is what drains your peace. The scale principle corrects this imbalance. When something irritates you, mentally place the event on the scale. You don't need to be exact. You just need to be honest. The very act of labeling the event forces your mind to shift from emotional interpretation to rational evaluation. If you conclude it's a small matter, which it usually is, your reaction naturally softens. If it's genuinely important, then your response becomes purposeful rather than impulsive. Another aspect of this attitude is learning to differentiate between what is merely inconvenient and what is meaningful. A spilled drink is inconvenient, but it doesn't define your day. A delayed response is inconvenient, but it doesn't determine your worth. A minor mistake is inconvenient, but it doesn't stop your progress. When you stop blending inconvenience with significance, your mind becomes lighter. This attitude also prevents accumulation. When you treat small events as large, they stack on top of each other until the emotional weight becomes overwhelming. That's how people reach the end of the day feeling exhausted even without facing anything truly difficult. But when you regularly scale down minor irritations, they dissolve quickly instead of piling up. You stay emotionally available for things that actually matter. Look at how this works in real-life examples. You're driving and someone hesitates at a green light. Without the scale principle, you react as if the moment is a personal offense. With it, you instantly see it for what it is, a tiny delay that won't alter your day in any meaningful way. You continue driving without feeding the irritation. Or someone forgets to respond to a detail you mentioned earlier. Instead of building a narrative about disrespect, you place it on the scale, a small oversight, not a hostile act. When you change the scale, you change the feeling. It also transforms your internal dialogue. Instead of telling yourself, "This always happens," or "People don't know how to behave," you begin to think, "This isn't worth my energy," or "This is too small to disturb me." You act as the judge of what earns emotional access, instead of letting irritation make that choice for you. Even larger situations benefit from the scale principle. When something genuinely important happens, scaling it correctly prevents overreaction. You respond with clarity, not panic. You deal with the problem instead of feeding it. You stay grounded even when the circumstances require strength. This attitude brings a quiet stability into your everyday life. You stop flipping emotional switches over every little thing. You stop allowing the world to dictate your mood. You stop living as if every moment is critical. Instead, you build a calm internal hierarchy. What is important receives attention, and what is trivial is released quickly. Over time, the scale principle becomes instinctive. Your mind gets used to evaluating before reacting. Irritation appears, and instead of taking over, it gets measured, and often dismissed. You begin to move through life with the confidence of someone who is not easily thrown off balance. And now that you've learned to reduce the weight of the external world, you're ready for the next attitude. A practice that strengthens your emotional endurance and protects your peace even in unpredictable situations. Attitude 4. The emotional distance technique. Step back so the moment shrinks. One of the most effective ways to stop getting irritated at small things is learning how to create emotional distance from the moment as it happens. When you're too close to the situation, everything feels intense. Your reactions feel justified, your emotions feel urgent, and your thoughts feel completely accurate. But the closer you stand to the moment, the harder it becomes to see it for what it truly is. Temporary, small, and usually insignificant. Emotional distance gives you perspective, and perspective naturally weakens irritation. The emotional distance technique is about stepping out of the center of the moment. Not physically, but mentally. You take a small step back in your awareness so you're not inside the emotion, but observing it from a clearer point of view. When you do this, the situation loses its power over you. The irritation loosens. You regain the ability to respond instead of reacting. A practical way to understand this is to imagine yourself viewing the situation from a few feet away. Instead of being the person who is irritated, imagine you're the person watching someone else being irritated. As soon as you shift into that observer role, the emotion loses its grip. The comments, the tone, the behavior, they all feel less personal, less sharp, less urgent. The moment becomes just a moment, not a threat. For example, someone makes a careless remark that hits you the wrong way. If you stay inside the moment, the remark feels heavy. But if you mentally step back and observe the interaction from a wider lens, the remark becomes something small floating in a larger context. You begin to see the person's stress, the situation's timing, or the lack of intent behind the words. Irritation fades because perspective grows. This technique works because the mind exaggerates whatever is directly in front of it. When you pull back, everything becomes proportionate again. Think of how something looks enormous when held an inch from your eye, but perfectly normal when placed at arm's length. Irritation behaves the same way. Too close, it dominates your field of view. A little distance, and it becomes manageable. Another example, you're rushing to get somewhere, and someone ahead of you is moving slowly. If you stay mentally attached to your urgency, every second feels like a personal attack. But when you apply emotional distance, you shift from "they're slowing me down" to "there is a person walking at their pace, and I'm choosing how I perceive it." That tiny shift dismantles the pressure. The emotional distance technique is not about ignoring your feelings. It's about preventing them from expanding beyond their rightful size. When you step back mentally, you allow your rational mind to return. You begin to ask better questions. Is this really about me? Will this matter tonight? Is this irritation worth carrying? Questions like these create clarity, and clarity is the enemy of unnecessary irritation. This attitude also helps you break the habit of over-identifying with your reactions. Many people don't just feel irritation, they become it. Their identity fuses with the moment, and the emotional reaction becomes who they are. When you practice emotional distance, you separate the feeling from your sense of self. You go from "I am angry" to "I am experiencing anger." That distinction is powerful. It returns control to you. Another interesting effect of emotional distance is how it changes your internal narrative. When you step back, you stop using absolute language like always, never, and everyone. You stop dramatizing the moment. You stop interpreting the situation as a repeated pattern. Instead, you see it as a single, isolated event that will pass quickly. That shift alone prevents irritation from snowballing into larger frustration. This attitude is also deeply practical in interpersonal situations. When someone behaves poorly, emotional distance gives you the space to evaluate their behavior without absorbing it. You see their tone without internalizing it. You hear their words without letting them become part of your mood. You watch them act from their own stress or immaturity, and you remain grounded. You maintain your composure because you are not entangled in their emotional state. The technique can even transform your relationship with inconvenience. Life constantly throws small disruptions your way: sudden noise, slow responses, unexpected delays, clumsy mistakes. When you stay mentally close, each inconvenience feels sharp and irritating. But when you pull back, these same events lose urgency. They appear as small bumps on a much larger road. They don't need emotional investment. They only need acknowledgement and release. A practical method to apply emotional distance is to imagine yourself watching the interaction on a screen. You're not the actor, you're the viewer. That shift alone changes your inner response. Another method is to imagine zooming out with a camera lens. The wider the frame, the smaller the irritation appears. Suddenly, the situation doesn't feel like the center of your universe. It becomes a minor detail inside a much bigger picture. The more you practice this attitude, the more automatic it becomes. Irritation shows up, but instead of reacting, you take half a second to pull back. That half second becomes your protection. It gives you room to breathe, to evaluate, to choose. It prevents you from merging with the emotion. It gives you the freedom to respond with intelligence rather than impulse. Soon, people will notice something different about you. You won't get hooked by small behaviors. You won't be pulled into pointless reactions. You'll respond to difficult moments with steadiness instead of irritation. Not because life stopped being messy, but because you stopped letting the moment swallow you. With emotional distance, every irritation becomes smaller, every reaction becomes calmer, and every day becomes lighter. And now that you've learned how to step back from the moment, you're ready for the final part, where everything comes together in a conclusion that strengthens your long-term ability to remain composed. Irritation is usually treated as something harmless, a natural part of everyday life, a minor emotion that comes and goes without consequence. But when you pay attention, you realize how much energy it steals. It interrupts your focus. It poisons small moments. It lingers long after the situation ends. And worst of all, it becomes a habit. You start reacting automatically to things that don't deserve your attention, as if irritation were the default lens through which you see the world. Stoic philosophy offers something radically different: the ability to walk through life with a calm, deliberate mind, no matter how many imperfections you encounter. Everything you learned in the previous attitudes leads you toward a new internal posture, one where the outside world doesn't hold the power to shake you so easily. You learn to slow your inner momentum so your reactions don't outrun your clarity. You learn to detach your interpretations from the facts so you don't get lost in stories your mind invents. You learn to scale down small events instead of treating them as emotional emergencies. And you learn to create distance so the moment doesn't swallow you whole. These attitudes are not isolated techniques. Together, they form a new way of navigating the chaos and unpredictability of daily life. When you combine them, irritation loses its typical structure. Instead of rising quickly and taking control, it becomes something you notice calmly, analyze briefly, and release intentionally. You regain ownership over your inner state. You stop walking around with tension in your shoulders and tightness in your chest. You stop replaying small frustrations in your mind. You stop letting other people's behavior determine your emotional temperature. You stop wasting your energy on things that don't leave a mark on your life. A powerful shift happens when you internalize this. Irritation is not proof that you care, it's proof that you're reacting without direction. You don't become a colder person by reducing irritation. You become a clearer one. You save your energy for what matters, instead of scattering it on every little thing that crosses your path. Your emotional world becomes cleaner. Your presence becomes stronger. Your relationships become easier. And your mind becomes noticeably lighter. Think about what your day looks like when irritation is rare instead of constant. You interact with people without assuming the worst. You handle inconveniences without losing your rhythm. You think more clearly, speak more intentionally, and move through your responsibilities with greater efficiency. You give your patience to the right places. You protect your mood instead of letting it change 10 times a day. You become someone who responds, not someone who reacts. What's even more important is that these attitudes are not meant for moments of crisis. They're meant for the ordinary moments that fill your life. The comment someone makes without thinking. The person who takes too long to answer. The unexpected delay, the small mistake, the slightly off tone. These moments accumulate, and if you don't manage them well, they weigh on your emotional health. But if you approach them with the mindset you've built here, they lose the ability to affect you. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't require perfection. It only requires awareness. Every time you choose to slow down, detach your interpretation, scale the moment, or create emotional distance, you're training your mind to operate from strength instead of impulse. Even if you do it imperfectly, the effect compounds. The world may remain noisy, chaotic, careless, or unpredictable, but you won't. You'll be anchored within yourself. And with time, you'll notice something subtle but profound. Irritation no longer feels familiar. Your mind begins to reject it. Your body doesn't tense as easily. Your thoughts don't spiral as quickly. The calm you create becomes your natural setting, not something you have to fight for. This is what the Stoics meant when they said that the greatest victory is over oneself. It's not a dramatic confrontation. It's the quiet mastery of your own reactions. The goal is not to become unfeeling. It's to become intentional. To treat your peace as something worth protecting. To understand that your inner world is shaped not by what happens to you, but by how you choose to interpret and respond to it. Anger and irritation may still appear, but they no longer command your behavior. They no longer write your story. They become signals, not chains. If you continue practicing the attitudes you learned here, you'll become someone who moves through life with a calm strength that others feel immediately. Someone who doesn't get pulled into every distraction. Someone who sees clearly, speaks thoughtfully, and reacts with purpose. Someone who chooses peace not because the world is peaceful, but because you are. And that is the true victory. When your inner state belongs fully to you. Before you leave, take a moment to support the message you just heard. If this video added clarity or helped you rethink the way you react to small frustrations, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next lessons on Stoicism and emotional mastery. And share your perspective in the comments. Which small irritation are you ready to release, or which attitude from this video are you willing to practice starting today? Your reflection might help someone who is going through the same struggle.